I'm Abby Kinney, and you are listening to Upzoned. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Upzoned, a show where we take a big story from the news each week that touches the Strong Towns conversation and we upzone it. We talk about it in depth. I'm Abby Kinney, an urban planner in Kansas City, and today I am joined by my friend, Chuck Marohn. Hello, welcome back.
Hey Abby, it's so nice to see you. I know that we put some of these videos on YouTube and in other places. I just want to point out I got my brand new today in the mail, my multi-studio sweatshirt. So I got the official merch from your employer now.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad it arrived. It took about a month to actually get it shipped to you. We were supposed to send it around the holidays, and I'm just not very good at shipping things. So I'm glad that you finally have
Well,
it.
I had it on earlier today on a meeting, and someone said, "Is this like paid product placement?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, like I love." Like Gould Evans is amazing, and now that you are multi-studio, I love the work that you all do. And I met you because I was there working with your team, and doing some really innovative stuff in Kansas City and in the Kansas City region. You guys are a big part of leading this conversation there. And so, yeah, it's just I've always I was I think this is the third year you've been doing this, or the fourth. Like,
Yeah.
you've been doing this a while
I
now,
know. I think it's been 3
and
years now, which is crazy.
yeah, it's amazing. It's great. I remember when we first set this up, and I thought, wow, to have someone of your caliber from an organization of that caliber here doing the show with us is just amazing. So, not a product placement. You sent this to me to be kind, and I'm wearing it to be kind. So, thank
Yeah,
you.
shameless plug. And also, I have the same hoodie, and it is one of my favorite hoodies. So I hope you find it very comfortable. Um, and Strong
It's very
Towns needs to get
comfortable.
some hoodies because I happen to be a hoodie fan. So
We do, no doubt. Let's
okay,
do it.
cool. Well, so we have a kind of complicated article today that I think is going to be really interesting to cover. This was published in the Oregonian by Goja Wozniaka, and it is entitled Northeast Portland's Cully Neighborhood Fights Displacement, Climate Change with Urban Renewal, but Will It Work? So, I guess a little bit of background for people who aren't familiar with Coley. So, this is a neighborhood that is basically, it's northeast of Portland proper. It was annexed by the city back in 1985. It has maintained relatively low property values over the years since the city has experienced a lot of growth. It has areas that it kind of has like an agricultural vibe, even though it is this kind of, uh, you know, I would say relatively dense single family environment. It lacks a lot of built roads. It doesn't have a lot of sidewalks or curbs. I don't know if it has, proper gutters and that sort of thing. There's a lot of industrial uses that are on the north edge of the city, some contamination issues. There's several mobile home parks throughout the area, as well as kind of affordable apartments that are sprinkled throughout the neighborhood. So, according to this article, it's a very diverse working class population. There's a lot of residents that live below the poverty level. And in recent years, this community has established this coalition that is really trying to keep the area affordable. They've been successful so far in buying out a mobile home park so that residents could, fight being displaced. They have been building affordable housing and improving some of the contamination issues in the area. And now they are about to implement this kind of big experiment with the intention of maintaining the area's current affordability. And the tool that they're planning to use is urban renewal. And for those of us who don't know what urban renewal is, it's really commonly known as the strategy that was implemented from the late 40s 70s, which seized and demolished large swaths of urban neighborhoods in order to modernize these areas. It displaced a lot of residents, it demolished a lot of housing. It was enabled through a lot of federal funds, but implemented at this very kind of localized level. And in the context of Portland's Cully neighborhood, it is essentially this tax increment financing tool that allows the city to borrow a massive amount of money, $350 million over 30 years. And then under this plan, the area would invest in kind of programs and purchases that are intended to stabilize residents and businesses. So, buying land for affordable housing development, and then eventually investing in quality of life improvements for the area. Um, so it's basically a large TIF for the area that is, focused on anti-displacement, freezes. For anyone who doesn't know what tax increment financing is, it basically freezes the taxes currently, the property taxes for the area, and then anything, that is improved in that tax base, a portion or all of it is going towards these, anti-displacement efforts rather than going to the county and the city. So it's kind of a value capture method of reinvesting in an area. So I hope I explained that correctly. Chuck, feel free to jump in if you think there's anything that we should kind of explain about this. I think that there's a lot to unpack here. I know that there are, various cities and states that use TIF and these urban renewal strategies in a variety of different ways. So I don't necessarily want to associate what they're doing with the urban renewal picture that we think about from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where we're like demolishing large swaths of land. Chuck, maybe you disagree with me. It is a little bit different. Definitely better intentions here, but I do have a little bit of skepticism about kind of the massive scale of the
Oh,
investment and whether or not this is really going to work.
so okay, you
There's a lot to kind of
you.
set up here because it is kind of
Oh my
complex.
gosh, this is. But you just okay. You just ended with better intentions, and I think that's one of the things that I want to stop and point out, because we can look back at urban renewal and say, boy, that was evil. Boy, that went in and some really like kind of despotic sense of what should happen. But if you go back and read the literature at the time, some of it is really gross, but a lot of it is done by people who were saying, here's how we show love to these disadvantaged communities. Here's how we go and help people better themselves. Here's how we take care of these places. And they were sensitive to it in a different way than we are today. Um, Back then, they were very sensitive to the idea of substandard housing.
Mm.
So they would look at a neighborhood and say, this neighborhood is blighted, and we need to go in and address that blight and help the poor, disadvantaged, marginalized people who live in this neighborhood live in something that's not blight. And so here's our plan. We'll call it urban renewal. Now, today, we are very sensitive to the idea of affordability. We're less sensitive to the idea of the quality of housing, and for a whole bunch of reasons, we're very sensitive to the idea of affordability. And so now, in order to achieve affordability, and by the way, help with climate change, and there's a whole bunch of other like ancillary things we want to do, we are going to go in with this same tool and use it different. And so when you say that it's better intentions today, I'm going to push back gently on that, because I think one of the things that we are guilty of, and I think humans are always guilty of this, but I think we should be aware of it in ourselves, is that we assume that we have better intentions than the people of the past, because we assume that our intentions are good and that what they did, because it didn't work out, they must have had nefarious intentions. And I'm going to suggest that whatever mix of good and bad intentions that they actually had at the time, we probably have those same inclinations today.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Does
mean,
that make
yeah, that
sense?
makes sense. I think you're probably
It's a word of caution,
yeah, and I think that we should
right?
always have caution when thinking about kind of grand schemes for, um, I, I guess, trying to slow down or intervene within the market. Also, understanding that displacement in a place like Portland is a huge problem. So I think that it's great that the community has come together and they're trying to find a way of getting to this issue of displacement. What I think was right about this article is that they are focusing on this idea of gentrification without displacement. Gentrification is obviously a very loaded term, a lot of different meanings and perceptions about what it is. I think what is right about this proposal is it kind of teases out what I think most people are concerned about when you hear the word gentrification, which is, being displaced due to taxes going up or rent becoming less affordable, going up at a higher rate than incomes are increasing. So I, I think that part is correct, and finding ways to build affordable housing is a good thing to do. I think it's a really challenging thing to do in practice, and this
Sure.
article doesn't exactly make it clear to me how they intend to do that. Um, I I had a hard time with this article because it was very, very long and it didn't give me a lot of like mathematical details about how this all really works. And I think it would have been helpful to see projections of how,
But there
yeah, it's like
aren't
how
any. I
these
mean, that's the
models
point.
work. And also
And
the city's borrowing a lot of money, right? I mean, they're betting
yes,
350 million
yes,
dollars. They're going to borrow that today, invest it, and then
yes.
as taxes go up in the area, um, and it's not clear if some people's taxes are frozen or if everybody's taxes are still going to go up, but we have a few affordable housing projects that we've invested in, or we bought out a mobile home park, but everybody else, your taxes are still going up. So it just really wasn't quite clear to me, how all this really works.
Well, I
So
can
it's
tell
hard to
you,
make a judgment on it, right?
yeah, I feel like it's very clear how this works. In my mind, be okay. The reason why I cued in on that idea of intentions is because if we are willing to, like on a moral scale, elevate our intentions and diminish the intentions of the past, I don't think we really ask hard questions about why urban renewal didn't
Hmm.
work. And we're going to repeat those problems again and again. The first quote in this article that I highlighted, and when you sent me this article, I said, "Oh, we will now use the One Ring for good." I'm a Tolkien fan, and so I can see Boromir sitting there going, "No, the One Ring, it's a gift. It's not the tool of the devil. It's Sauron. It's our tool. We can use it for good." So here's the quote: we asked, and this is the coordinator of Living
Yeah.
Cully, Maddie Norman. She says, "quote We asked, what if we could use the same tool that caused harm to instead repair that harm? What if the tool itself is neutral, but the way it's been used in the past created the problems?" I find this to be like the most dangerous mindset
Hmm.
imaginable, because what you're doing is you're saying, I am good and have good intentions, and the people of the past were bad and had bad intentions. And so the outcomes will be different. And I think that is just wrong. I think it's foolishly wrong. And let me give you, you said you were looking for details. Like, what's the math? How does this actually work? I'll tell you what the only real detail here is that has been worked out. And that is this: we are going to borrow the money and repay it by the increment of increase in value. So the way that you explain how TIF works, the values are frozen, and as the neighborhood goes up in value, more taxes are paid. That added tax rate will then go to repay this debt. Okay, so we take on the massive debt all at once, and now we're obligated to repay it by making property values go up. But we're going to spend the money that we get, this huge pot of money, making sure that nobody gets displaced when the property values go up. All right, now Let me say this a different, let me give you an alternate way to do this same exact thing that does not involve the one ring, right? Like touching, like we can use the one ring for good. Let's say we made this whole place a TIF and we said, all right, today the value's here and we're going to lock that in. And any value that goes up, we're going to use that to fund projects we would do to make the neighborhood better. Instead of having one big massive pot of money, we have what amounts to like an accelerating revolving
Yeah.
fund, so that when we get money in, we could spend it in this neighborhood. There's a set aside fund, there's a block. Here's why that's not as attractive to the people setting this up. It is slower. Your projects would be smaller. You don't have a huge pot of money that can employ a bunch of bureaucrats and people to do this kind of work. You actually have to like do the work and then employ it. And then it is more methodical. It is more intentional. The reason that they don't want that, the reason they want the big pot of money is because they believe they can wield the one ring for good because they're better people than the people who tried to wield the one ring 60, 70 years
Mm.
ago. And to me, that is like the number one signal that they lack the humility to actually do this in the way they're saying they're going to do it.
Well, so I think the value capture proposition is what is appealing to me about this plan. It's interesting to
Mm-hmm.
use TIF in this way. If you were doing smaller projects that, a neighborhood could leverage these funds for, I think that would be kind of a better approach. But yeah, this is definitely a very large amount of money. It seems like it would be a lump sum or maybe large amounts throughout 30 years. That isn't clear to me either. But um, what I think is interesting about this idea of good intentions is that, we're talking about 30 years. And so this is going to require leadership and consistency over 30 years to pay this back and to actually potentially
Over a
steward
whole
this money.
generation.
Yeah. So the people
Yeah.
who are managing it today, if there is not something in place to kind of keep this model true to what it was intended to be by the people who have created it, it could really go off the rails. And so I think that, the article talks a little bit about kind of the unsustainability of the level of energy and attention from community leaders something like this could take, and also that there's some level of susceptibility to the ever changing groups of elected officials that could impact this over 30 years. I'm sure the market will change, the politics will change. Um, who's to say how
But
this
Abby, they're
actually
going to spend
is
them,
spent and how it actually impacts the community, and whether
right.
if it
But they're
if
not
it
going
does
to,
stop displacement truly.
they're not going to get 350 million over 30
Yeah,
years.
probably
They're going to
not.
spend 350 million. No, they're going to spend 350 million in the near term on projects that they think are really important today, and then they're going to pay it back over
Hmm.
30 years. That's the okay. Remember when I put together the plan for Kansas City? We called it the local
Yeah.
reparations. Um, and we talked, I wrote a whole article about redlining, and the key difference between the plan that we put together at Strong Towns for the kind of similar neighborhoods in Kansas City, neighborhoods that were failing to thrive, were behind, were disenfranchised, were uninvested in, that were, whenever they did get investment, it resulted in gentrification. Um, the two key differences between this plan and the plan that we put together is, one, we emphasized local ownership. In other words, all the projects that we were doing were designed to get people in that neighborhood owning the neighborhood. So the idea of gentrification is rising land values and then property values, and then people get displaced. You've got to have rising property values to make a tax increment financing project
Right.
work. Like that
Yeah.
is the basis of it. In Portland, they want to, in a sense, use the money to kind of counteract the rising property values and subsidize people to stay in the neighborhood and, build like affordable housing. And what you actually needs to happen is that we need to get the people in the neighborhood to own the neighborhood, so that when it gets wealthier, they get wealthier, they get more capacity, they get, they share in that wealth that they're creating. The second part of our plan that's different from this is that our plan said we need to have each step, in a sense, reinforce the next. So it's not smart people or well-intentioned people or what have you coming in and picking out the projects that are the winners. It is the people on the ground that you're building off of who are themselves doing the projects, and that creates the increment. All the city is the seed money. You need to get into this place. You don't have the down payment. We will help you with the down payment and then retire that debt over time with the taxes. We will front the money for you so that you can get the loan and we'll secure it. And then your increment of taxes, instead of going to the whole pot of Kansas City, will be directed towards retiring the debt that we, the city, took on to help you get started. So the relationship is not we come in and do for you with a big pot of money and then use your success theoretically to pay that pot of money back. It is we clear a glide path for you to do the things that you think need to be done. And then when you do that, we're going to help you finance it with your own success. We're not going to benefit from that until you and this neighborhood have been made whole. And it is completely, to me, well, let me read one more quote from this article that I think is like, this is, I can't remember who said this one, but it just says she asked. This is a quote, how could this tool, this project they're doing, possibly have an anti-gentrification impact if it literally requires property values to go up in order for it to work? That's where the money comes from. That's what the tax increment is. And I feel like what we have here is we have a bunch of people who don't understand how markets work, how projects work, how finance works, how home ownership works, who just see a problem and see a mechanism to get a big pot of money. And very much like the urban renewal people in the 1960s can connect those into a nice sounding, flowery type of well-intentioned thing. And they're going to go out and repeat the same exact thing we did 60 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's what
I think this is going to be a disaster.
Well, and I hope it's not, sincerely, but that's what I found challenging about this article, because I think very literally, right? I want to know exactly how this works, and I felt the article was very just kind of flowery, and I felt like it was trying to kind of sell this idea without giving a lot of details. And details, I think, are very important because, you know, if you are living in this neighborhood and you say you've owned your house for 20 years, it seems like this plan actually, it's kind of betting on market forces to do what market forces are going to do, right? I mean, it's betting on the area to become more valuable in order to capture the, increment of tax revenue, the increased increment. And so it's not really, I guess, it's not trying to oppose the market, because it actually does rely on the market. But I guess, when your taxes go up eventually, that additional money is going into this pot so that they can build an affordable housing project, or
so they can pay
yeah,
back the
so that they can
debt.
pay back the debt. So
So they can pay
on
back the
those
debt,
projects
right?
that were built.
Mm-hmm. That were already
Yeah, that
done,
are already
right?
done and may not actually serve you if you're a homeowner in the area and you can't afford your taxes. I mean, I maybe you just like to stay in your house and you don't want to move into the project that they just built. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is a plan with
Can I
not a
point out
lot
one
of detail.
positive?
I'd actually love to send this to Joe Minicozy of Urban 3, who you did a lot of the research for, looking at the impact of redlining and kind of inequitable taxing dynamics. I'd love to get his thoughts on this, because I think he would find this pretty fascinating.
Well, yes, I think this would be one of them that we would have some debate. Joe and I would over
Yeah.
this. Let me throw this out to you, because I feel like, and let me point out what I think is the good part of this, or the part that I do think is different from the 1960s urban renewal. there's a commitment here to work in small
Mm-hmm.
increments, at least a stated commitment. And it is jumbled up with a whole bunch of like other competing interests. Like we want to have the greenest neighborhood possible, and we want to harden our place for climate change. And we want to, so that we want to add all these other like progressive, very nice, happy things on top of it. We want to layer in. Um, but the idea is, even with that, to not in the like in the 1960s go tear down an entire neighborhood and rebuild an entire
Mm.
neighborhood in a better
Yeah.
image. The idea is to find incremental projects to do. Now, I think that that difference is a really important one that makes this better than what we were doing in the 1960s. The problem is the way they're going about funding it is not conducive to that mindset. If what needs to happen in a neighborhood is a bunch of like $500 crosswalk improvements, and we need, to do $1,000 project over here and a $10,000 project over here, and someone's trying to get started and they need 15,000 for a down payment, and we're going to amateurize that for them so their taxes, all these things are very small scale. I'm going to give you a $350 million pot of money to go do small scale stuff. Do you know what happens because you are a human being? Is that you say, I can't process that many small
Mm-hmm.
things. I have this big pot of money. And what winds up happening is you wind up working in bigger and bigger things over
Yeah.
time because you just can't scale it.
Yeah.
And if you do try to scale it down, if you do say, like, we're only going to do small projects and I'm going to accept a little bit of chaos and messiness, then what happens is that you're going to waste a lot of money without like skin in the game and without feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. The skin in the game issue, I think, is a big one.
Yes.
And I'd actually love to see a model that, you know, helps homeowners in the area and improve their properties and invest in their properties and maybe provide tax abatement to them. If we're really trying to address this issue of displacement and taxes going up, it seems like we ought to kind of reverse what's happening here and instead, directly address
Yes.
people who have low income. They can't, maybe they're on a fixed income. They can't afford for their taxes to go up and have some kind of tax abatement program. And that's the way it works in a lot of neighborhoods. In my city, there's a
Mm-hmm.
$5,000 investment in your home, and it's very flexible for what you invest in. But as long as you make that investment, you can get 10 years of tax abatement. You can do that every 10 years, and a lot of people qualify for it. Partner that, maybe match somebody and make it some kind of grant program to help them out with that investment. Now their wealth has gone up because their house has been improved and they're able to stabilize their taxes. So this seems like it kind of does the opposite of that. It's kind of banking on people's taxes going up so that they can pay off the debt, which is what worries me. I sincerely hope this works out for them.
I, I'm. I hope it works out too. I'm deeply
Yeah.
skeptical. In Kansas City, what we see is we see the city historically using these tools for really big
Yeah.
projects. So the huge hotel developer comes in, or the huge property developer comes
Yeah.
in, and they want a tax abatement, they want a TIF, they want their infrastructure costs diminished. The city's like, yeah, we'll do all that. And then we have this struggling neighborhood over here, but because there isn't one big developer to go through the process, that neighborhood doesn't get any of that kind of love or kind of stuff going
Yeah.
on. What we suggested Kansas City should do, and really every city with struggling neighborhoods should do, is take those tools that you're willing to use for the big, huge, and then just scale it down. And the people running the programs will say, well, that's not very efficient. Like, this is a $40 million project, and so I can afford to hire a bond advisor and a financial advisor and all these other things. Yeah, you're going to have to become smarter, quicker, lighter, cheaper. You're going to have to do it to scale it down to
Mm.
that. But that's kind of like your transaction cost as a city to bring this neighborhood back and to mature this neighborhood. That's what we're paying you for. Stop losing money on that big investment. Go make money on these small investments, and it will all work out. What this does is say we don't have to do that hard work. We can stay with like the big bureaucracy. We can stay with the big top down stuff. We can stay with a big slush fund. We're just going to be a little bit smarter and more strategic than people in the past were about how we spend it.
Mm.
And I don't, I think anyone who has studied human psychology to any degree will recognize, anyone who's studied business management to any degree will recognize like the folly in that approach, whether you have like the specific details of what they're going to do or
Mm.
not. That just as a mental framework, walking in the door makes no sense. And they think they can wield the One Ring for good. And I think they will wind up aiding the evil Lord Sauron and his plan to gentrify gentrify and stagnate large parts of Portland.
Yeah, I'd almost like to see some kind of plan that does decentralize the investments that come out, in addition to having some kind of tax abatement program. Like, I like the idea of actually utilizing TIF to upgrade smaller sites for infrastructure so that people can actually invest in vacant lots and that sort of thing. So that incremental development can work rather than utilizing TIF for these large projects. Um, so it's an interesting idea. We'll see. We'll see how it's spent. It, it's really easy for things to go really wrong with really large amounts of money, and we learned that during urban renewal. Um, and hopefully, this group stays true to their intent and are truly use it in a very smart way. And we're proven totally wrong, and they saved the neighborhood from displacement.
Well, here's a quote from the director of development investment at Prosper Portland. Quote, "We can't stop market forces, but we can be intentional. I'm sorry, we can be intentional about where public money
Mm.
goes. We've always been able to be intentional about where public money goes. Like that's never been a limitation on us. We've always been able to be
Mm.
intentional about how we spend public money. There's nothing about having a $350 million fund that we can tap into now, um, that would prompt us to be more intentional than we have been in the past. Like why does it take a whole bunch more money to be intentional? Why aren't we intentional
Right.
already?
Why isn't the city of
And I
Portland making these investments?
yes, why aren't we making these investments already?
Hmm.
Why aren't we out there doing these things? Why? Yeah. So it feels to me like what we have is people with good intentions, and I'm not doubting the intentions. I think you're right that people here have good intentions. I just don't think they're better intentions than in the
Hmm.
past. They're just more attuned to modern sensibilities. We have, good intentions, have found a mechanism to acquire a lot of money, have branded that acquisition of money with all the buzzwords of the day: green, solar panels, climate change, inequity, black and brown neighborhoods. You like go through your list of buzzwords, and now are going to use that money to go out and do quote unquote good in the image that they see it.
Hmm.
And okay, I'm not doubting their sincerity, and I'm not doubting um, their intentions. I'm doubting their humility, and I'm doubting their faith in themselves, which I think is likely
Hmm.
misdirected. There's a scene in the Lord of the Rings, the movies, and it's in the book as well, where they're in the cave, and Frodo says to Gandalf, um, something along the lines of, I wish Frodo had killed Gollum when he had a chance. And there's this back and forth about what you do with great power. How do you wield great power? And that you really shouldn't want or seek out great power, because when you do, you tend to, even when you have good intentions,
Hmm.
misuse it, not be able to utilize it. And I think systems that start with the idea that we're going to borrow huge amounts of money to do good, and then when we do good, we'll be able to pay back the money and everyone will be better off, is to me just a backward system. Why don't we start with, we're going to go do good, And when we go do good with what we have, we will see things get better. When they do, we will have more money to continue to do more good. And so the feedback loop is, if what we think is good doesn't actually work, we're not going to have more money to continue. We're going to have to figure something else out. That, to me, it's the same intentions, it's the same people, it might even be the same projects. It's just a more productive feedback loop that will actually make you accountable to the people in the neighborhood, as opposed to accountable to a bond market that you now owe $350 million to.
Well, I think we'll end it on that note. That's very good, Chuck. I feel bad because I sincerely I want I hope everything works out for this neighborhood. It's actually, I was looking at it on Google. It's a really cool looking area. It's got a lot of like
It is.
homesteading, and it's, if it displaces people and this plan doesn't work out,
It'd be sad.
yeah, that's really sad.
This is this place has a real strong towns vibe to
Totally.
it. And
Yeah.
if I got an invitation to go there, I would love to go there. I would love to, you know, see this place, chat with the people there, learn about their lives. Yeah, it's got a real strong towns
Yeah, it
vibe.
does.
I'm
Yeah, me
nervous
too.
for them and their future.
Okay, well, let's leave it there. But before we end today, it is time for the Down Zone, which is the part of the show where we can share anything we have been reading, watching, listening to, anything that's been taking up our time these days. So, Chuck, I'm going to pivot to you. What have you been up to?
I'm gonna do three quick sports
Oh,
things.
geez.
First, you're back. Your team's back in the AFC Championship
Yep.
game. So
Yeah, thank
congratulations.
you.
Good luck to you. By the time this comes out, we will know if they're going back to the Super Bowl or
Yeah.
not. So we will
Yep.
see. Um, I know I'm cheering for you.
Thank
I'm rooting
you.
for you. Um, the second one is that your baseball team traded my baseball team a player, and it looks like your team is just unloading talent and trying to lose as many games as possible, which I'm grateful for because you're in our division and that just helps
Yeah.
us. But third, this summer I've got two nephews who are teenagers now, and I needed some work done this summer, and I made a bet with them about the Vikings. I'm a Vikings, I'm from Minnesota, so I have to cheer for the Vikings, but I did not think we would be very good. And we made a bet and I lost the bet. And so tonight, as soon as we're done here, I am driving down to Eden Prairie. I'm picking up my two nephews and I'm taking them to a Timberwolves game, which was my part of the bet.
Mm.
If they lost the bet, they were each going to have to do six hours of hard labor in my backyard for
Jeez.
free. Yeah. So that didn't work out. I'm going to have to pay them, but it's all good. I'll take them to the game and we'll have a fun
Yeah, that
time.
sounds great. Yeah, my husband was actually at the game last weekend, and I watched it a little bit with my sister. But yeah, I'm not as into football as I think most people are, but it is exciting. We're doing really well. And I guess there's a game on Sunday this weekend, and then it's the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Is that correct? Um,
If you win, you'll
we'll
be in
be
the
in the
Super
Super
Bowl.
Bowl.
I'm not a super big into football either, but there is a community vibe that kind of goes with it,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
It's fun when you're a winner, and you guys got cool colors too. I mean, I like your team color. Ours are
Me
purple.
too.
Like, what is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got good colors. I like the aesthetic for the most part. We're playing the Bengals, it looks like, on Sunday. Ugh.
Yeah, you're playing the
Yeah, those
Bengals,
are,
and they went to the Super Bowl. They beat you last year. They're very
yeah.
good. So
Not
we'll see.
I don't know about
They're
the
a team to cheer
orange, to be
for.
honest with you. Um so yeah, not as good of colors, so they probably won't win, right? I'll be eating those words maybe
Right.
in a week. So sorry to all
Yeah.
the Chiefs fans. But no, the sport that I actually got kind of into was soccer when the World Cup was on. That last
Mhm.
game, I got really into that. So I actually think I need to go see soccer live. I didn't realize how fun it is to watch. It's much more fast paced than football. I just feel like football is very slow, and there's not a lot of
Interesting.
action. It's kind of baseball is a little bit the same way. Um, so yeah, not I don't know, not as fun to watch as soccer.
I have watched two soccer matches in my life. One when I was in Europe, and it was a ton of fun because I was with Europeans who
Yeah, it's
really
really
cared.
serious.
And once over here, which was a lot like watching chess to me. But you know,
Yeah, it's amazing how much they run. I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine some of the most
yeah.
fit people ever. Um, but yeah,
Oh,
I actually didn't have a sports down zone. I was just going to share that I've been catching up on a lot of movies that like classic movies and movies that I didn't really get into as a kid. So this past week I
okay.
watched
Come on.
Jurassic
I know you're going to say some
no,
classic
Jurassic
movie.
Park
Yes.
1, 2, and 3. I watched all 3 of them. Yeah, I guess they're not classic movies to you, perhaps.
See, this is what I was going to say. You're going to say this classic movie, and I'm going to say that came out when I was like totally an adult. Oh, yeah. Jurassic Park. What year did that come out? I
Uh,
mean, it had to be like in the late
let's see,
90s.
Jurassic Park 1. I'm
Um,
Googling it.
yeah, Jurassic Park.
93.
Yeah. I'm, yeah. So I graduated in 91. This is not a classic movie. Let's not go
Okay.
there.
Well,
But
I was born in
you watched
93,
a
so not to make you feel bad.
all right. Okay, you can call it a classic movie. That's fine. They're good. The number two is, I mean, they get progressively worse, right? The
Yeah.
first three,
Yeah.
but the first one is like iconic, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
I thought
really
the
good.
first one was great. The number 2 and number 3
Mhm.
were they were still entertaining.
Just
Yeah,
gratuitous.
they were
Yeah.
entertaining. They were basically the same movies, with a little bit of a different
Uh-huh.
plot line. But yeah, I thought it was fun. My dog was actually watching it and kind of into it, which I thought was kind of weird. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
don't know. I'm trying to watch all these movies that I just wasn't into as a kid. So I was thoroughly entertained in the
I,
cold weather this week.
I still think you and I should do like an alternate podcast where we just watch movies and then comment on them from an urban design standpoint.
Yeah, that's a
Someday
great
I want to
idea.
do this. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should create
Yeah.
that podcast. That's a
I
great
was
idea.
thinking Stranger Things would be really cool. Because when I was watching Stranger Things with my kids, I'm like, oh, there's so much here we could discuss because they're doing, it's a movie
Yeah.
set and it's depicted in the 80s, but then it's a town and there's parts of the town that like make sense. They're like coherent. And then there's other parts that are not. And it intersects with this like horror part. And yeah,
Hmm.
so I still have this dream of doing that someday.
I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. We've talked about
Yeah,
it
I
before.
know, but now I'm really thinking about it, and I'm always noticing, like I'm always noticing like, the neighborhood types and the settings of various different movies and whether, are they in a streetcar suburb with bungalows, or are they in, like a newer
Yeah,
suburb or 1980s suburb? I mean, there's a lot that you could talk about in some of these different movies and TV shows. Um, hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll put a
All
pin
right.
in that.
Think
Yeah.
about it.
Somebody might
Put a
steal
pin
it
in that
now.
one.
Okay. Let's end it there. Don't put out any ideas before we develop them. Um, well, thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Upzoned. Keep doing what you can to build a strong town. Thanks, Chuck.